She stands alone in a $30 million mansion where no lover ever stayed for breakfast. At 79 years old, Diane Keaton has everything the world told her to want. The Oscar sits on a shelf gathering dust. The magazine covers have faded into yellowed paper. The fortune she built from loneliness now surrounds her in empty rooms that echo with silence. Her hands tremble when she reaches for her morning coffee. Her memory fractures like shattered glass. Sometimes she forgets the name of the dog sleeping at her feet. Sometimes she forgets that the man she loved for 20 years never actually loved her back. But what she can never forget is the feeling of being the woman no one ever chose. This is not a story about fame. This is a story about the price one woman paid for being different in a world that only loves you when you fit inside their perfect little box. Before we dive into video, please subscribe to our channel. To understand how Diane Keaton became the loneliest icon in Hollywood, we must return to where the pain first planted its roots. Los Angeles in the late 1950s, a cramped house with peeling paint and a roof that leaked every time the rain came down. Little Diane Hall sits curled up beside her sister, listening to sounds that children should never have to decode. Her mother crying softly in the kitchen, the scrape of a wooden spoon against a pot, the heavy silence of her father who works all day and says almost nothing when he comes home. Her mother Dorothy was once crowned Mrs. Los Angeles. She was a woman who knew how to light up a room with just her smile. But now she stands trapped behind a stove in a floral dress that has lost its color. Her dreams died somewhere between the wedding ring and the third load of laundry. She never spoke about what she gave up, but Diane saw it in her eyes every single day. The emptiness, the regret, a slow, quiet death of a woman who was told that happiness lives inside a kitchen. Young Diane watched her mother disappear inch by inch. She saw how marriage turned a beauty queen into a ghost. She learned early that love for women often means erasing yourself until there is nothing left. Society in the 1950s had one message for girls: be quiet, be small, be pleasant, marry young, have children, do not ask for more. But Diane could not shrink herself no matter how hard she tried. She was awkward in school. She spoke too little. She laughed at the wrong times. Other children avoided her. Teachers shook their heads. She spent hours alone just watching clouds move across the sky. Inside her mind, a different world was taking shape. A world where women were allowed to be strange. A world where being different did not mean being wrong. Then one afternoon, everything shifted. Diane stepped onto her high school stage to play Blanche DuBois in a streetcar named Desire. The moment the lights hit her face, something cracked open inside her chest. She was no longer the weird, quiet girl everyone ignored. She was someone else. Someone powerful. Someone who could make a room full of strangers feel something real. For the first time in her life, Diane felt seen. Acting was not a career choice. It was survival. It was the only place where being broken was considered beautiful. At 19, she packed a suitcase and bought a one-way ticket to New York City. She had no connections. No money, no plan, just a dream that everyone told her was foolish. New York greeted her with freezing winters and cockroach-infested apartments. She worked as a waitress. She sang off-key in bars just to pay rent. She auditioned for roles and got rejected over and over again. Casting directors told her she was too tall, too awkward, too strange-looking. They said her face would never sell tickets. Boo. Diane kept showing up. She kept knocking on doors that slammed in her face, and somewhere in that relentless refusal to quit, she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She changed her name from Diane Hall to Diane Keaton, using her mother's maiden name. It was not just a stage name. It was a vow, a promise to the woman who gave up everything, a silent scream that said, "I will not disappear the way you did." Years passed in a blur of struggle and small victories. Then in 1972, Diane got the call that changed everything. Francis Ford Coppola wanted her for The Godfather. She would play Kay Adams, the quiet outsider who falls in love with a man she can never truly reach. When Diane stepped onto that set, she had no idea she was about to meet the person who would break her heart for the next 2 decades. His name was Al Pacino. The first time their eyes met, something shifted in the air. It was not love at first sight. It was recognition. 2 broken people who had spent their whole lives feeling like outsiders suddenly saw themselves reflected in someone else. Al was intense, mysterious, emotionally unavailable. He carried his childhood trauma like a coat he refused to take off. Diane was open, vulnerable, desperate to be loved. She saw the pain in him and thought she could heal it. She thought if she loved him hard enough, he would finally let her in. She was wrong. Their relationship was never official. There were no public photos, no red carpet appearances, no engagement ring, just years and years of almost together, almost in love, almost enough. They would film together and the chemistry was undeniable. When the cameras stopped rolling, Diane would wait in her hotel room for a phone call that rarely came. She gave him everything, her time, her heart, her hope. And Al gave her just enough attention to keep her hanging on, but never enough to make her feel chosen. For 20 years, Diane stayed caught in that painful place between love and abandonment. She told herself that he was just scared, that he needed time, that eventually he would realize she was the one. But deep down she knew the truth. Al Pacino was a man who ran from anything that required commitment. He loved her in his own broken way, but he would never love her the way she needed to be loved. In 1990, they were filming The Godfather Part 3 in Rome. For a brief moment, Diane let herself believe that maybe this time would be different. They were living together, laughing together. She thought he was finally ready, so she gave him an ultimatum. Marry me or I walk away. Al said nothing. He just stood up and left the room. That silence was louder than any rejection could ever be. It shattered something inside Diane that would never fully heal. And then, just when she thought the pain could not get worse, life delivered another blow. Her father, Jack Hall, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Jack was the only man who had ever loved Diane without conditions. He never asked her to be smaller. He never told her to change. He celebrated her weirdness. He believed in her dreams when no one else did. Losing him felt like losing the last piece of solid ground she had left to stand on. Diane spent months moving between two kinds of grief. Grieving the man who would never marry her and grieving the man who loved her but was dying. She went to therapy. She cried until there were no tears left. She stood in front of mirrors and did not recognize the woman staring back. The world still saw Diane Keaton, the Oscar-winning actress, the fashion icon, the independent woman who had it all. But inside she was drowning. She felt like a fraud, like someone pretending to be strong while slowly falling apart. After her father died and Al walked away for good, Diane made a choice. She stopped waiting. She stopped hoping that someone would finally pick her. At 50 years old, she adopted her first child, then another. She built a family not because she had a partner, but because she refused to let loneliness define her entire existence. She named her daughter Dexter and her son Duke. They became the center of her world. The love she had spent decades trying to give to men who did not want it finally had a place to land. But even motherhood could not erase the ache. Diane threw herself into real estate. She bought houses, restored them, sold them, bought more. She became obsessed with creating beautiful spaces that she would never share with a lover. Her mansion in Brentwood is a masterpiece. Every room is perfectly designed. Every detail is intentional. But there is no second toothbrush in the bathroom, no extra pair of shoes by the door, no one to say good morning to except the housekeeper and the dog. Diane Keaton built an empire out of emptiness. Her net worth is over $100 million. She owns properties across California. She has written books, directed films, produced projects. She stayed relevant in an industry that discards women the moment they turn 40. But none of that success could fill the hole left by a lifetime of unreturned love. Now at 79, Diane lives quietly. She wakes up early and makes herbal tea. She does yoga in a sunlit room. She walks through her garden where lavender and jasmine grow in neat rows. She writes in a journal that no one will ever read. She talks to her kids when they visit. She pets her rescue dog and whispers things she used to say to the men who left. On good days, she feels peaceful. On bad days, her memory slips. She forgets where she put her keys. She forgets the name of a movie she starred in. She forgets small things that remind her that time is running out. The world still celebrates Diane Keaton as a feminist icon, a woman who chose herself, a woman who proved you do not need a man to be whole. And there is truth in that narrative. Diane did choose herself, but not because she wanted to, because she had no other choice. Every man she ever loved left. Every relationship ended in heartbreak. She did not reject marriage. Marriage rejected her. She did not choose to be alone. She learned how to survive it. In interviews, Diane laughs about her past. She jokes about Woody Allen. She talks fondly about Al Pacino. She says she has no regrets, but if you look closely, you can see the sadness behind the smile. You can hear the shake in her voice when someone asks why she never married. You can feel the weight of all those years spent loving people who did not love her back. There is a particular kind of pain that comes with being almost chosen, with being good enough to date, but not good enough to marry, with being interesting enough to sleep with, but not valuable enough to commit to. Diane Keaton lived in that space for most of her adult life. She was always the woman men loved but never stayed for. And that does something to a person. It makes you question your worth. It makes you wonder what is so fundamentally wrong with you that no one ever picks you. Diane poured that pain into her work. Every role she played carried a piece of her own heartbreak. The lonely wife in The Godfather, the neurotic girlfriend in Annie Hall, the forgotten mother in Because I Said So. She did not have to act, she just had to remember, and audiences felt it. They saw themselves in her. The women who were left, the women who were told they were too much or not enough, the women who built lives alone and pretended it was a choice. Her style became iconic, not because she was trying to be different, but because she was trying to disappear. The oversized blazers, the turtlenecks, the hats and scarves, they were armor, a way to hide the body that men looked at but never loved enough to stay. She dressed like someone who had given up on being desired and decided to just be comfortable. But despite everything, despite the heartbreak and the loneliness and the slow unraveling of her memory, Diane Keaton is still here. She still wakes up every morning. She still finds beauty in small things. She still believes in love, even though love never believed in her. And maybe that is the real tragedy. Not that she ended up alone, but that even after everything, she still has hope. She funds programs for older women struggling with mental health. She supports young actresses trying to break into Hollywood. She restores old buildings and preserves architecture. She gives quietly without needing recognition because she knows what it feels like to be forgotten. She knows what it feels like to be invisible, and she refuses to let other people suffer that same fate. Diane Keaton's story is not a fairy tale. There is no happy ending, no last-minute love story, no man who finally sees her worth and rushes back. She will most likely die alone in that beautiful mansion surrounded by things instead of people. Her memory will continue to fade. One day she might not remember Al Pacino's name. She might not remember the Oscar speech or the standing ovation. She might not remember any of it. But here is what she will leave behind. Proof that you can survive rejection. Proof that you can build something meaningful even when love fails you. Proof that a woman does not need to be chosen to matter. Diane Keaton spent her whole life being told she was too strange, too different, too much, and she became legendary anyway. Not because she fit in, but because she refused to shrink. Her tragedy is not that she ended up alone. Her tragedy is that she deserved better. She deserved a love that stayed. She deserved a partner who saw her weirdness as magic instead of a flaw. She deserved to grow old with someone who chose her every single day. But she did not get that, and somehow she survived anyway. So when you see Diane Keaton on a movie screen or in an old photograph, remember this. You are looking at a woman who gave everything and received almost nothing in return. A woman who built a legacy out of loneliness. A woman who smiled through decades of heartbreak because that is what the world expected from her. And she did it with grace, with dignity, with a quiet strength that most of us will never understand. At 79, Diane Keaton is still standing, still breathing, still hoping. And that in itself is the most heartbreaking and most beautiful thing of all. If Diane's story touched something inside you, then do not let it end here. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me what part of her journey hit you the hardest. Subscribe because we tell the stories that matter, the ones about real people with real pain who somehow found a way to keep going. Diane Keaton taught us that you do not have to be loved by everyone to be worth loving, and maybe that is the lesson we all needed to hear.